Public Works Committee to order at 5:03. First item on the agenda, and we're actually going to, once we get through the formalities, we're going to move item 4 up and discuss that first so our guests can depart. You don't have to leave, but. So, first item is Public Works minutes from last March. Paul, do you have any additions or corrections on those?
Just got them, so I'm looking at them here. Sorry. I think they look good to me.
All right.
Move to accept.
Second. Moved and seconded to accept the minutes as written. Right. The next item.
Do we have to vote on
it? No, you're fine.
Can I declare a unanimous vote?
Sure.
Right.
I just didn't know if procedurally.
and Sarah Hoggett is not here. She is on vacation, a much needed vacation. So the next item, item 4, discussion and possible action on acquisition of Highway 35 between Stage Line and Hanley Road. Okay. Which one?
I will inform the committee, and then if there's any additions from the public, feel free to step up to the podium. So the city was contacted by a developing company to develop the land on the northwest corner of the Hanley Road and Old Highway 35 intersection. Okay. Currently, the Old Highway 35 is underneath the township's jurisdiction, and as part of the project, staff would recommend, if they go through all the proper approvals, that so on and so forth, that access would have to come off of Highway 35, because right now, the only access into the development would be through the Hudson Meadows development. Well, the only way to get control or jurisdiction or allow that access is to possibly take over jurisdiction of whole Highway 35 from Stage Line to Hanley. And you can there's a map in your packet kind of where to help you assist where that is. And so I guess for tonight's purposes, we really don't want to get in the whole kind of development of the property and what the zone is there. We're just bringing it in front of Public Works Committee because there's been some preliminary discussions with the township on whether or not they would consider turning that jurisdiction over to the city, what that would look like. Do we as a city, Public Works Committee and Council, do we have any interest in taking on the responsibilities of that road to help develop that area of the city? So that's this is the initial steps in the process. Just looking for, your thoughts from Public Works Committee. Ultimately we'd have to take it for council for discussion there as well. But, it's from a staffing recommendation, we would recommend that, we would take over the jurisdiction of that section of Old Highway 35 to allow access into the new development. However, having said that, we want to make sure that we, look out for a couple things, and they are, the current condition of Old Highway 35 is not in the greatest shape. It's probably a pacer rating of a 5 or a 6. So there's some attention that needs to be taken to the road if we do take it in. Who's going to pay for those improvements, so on and so forth. Also, we don't want to take on the jurisdiction of a road or that road if ultimately the application or denial happens in Planning Commission or at Council. So in other words, we don't want to give authority, or we don't want to take on the jurisdiction of the road, and then, it's our responsibility to maintain and plow, and then the development ultimately kind of falls apart while we're still stuck with the easement on the ownership of that road. So we want to be careful with that as well. So, for tonight's purposes, I guess we're just looking for, general discussion and possibly a recommendation to take it to council. correct, Mr. Johnson? For further discussion and action at that point.
So this would be the section from Stagecoach to Hanley?
Yep, from basically the intersection at the movie theater to Hanley Road.
Is that about a mile or?
It's probably 3/4 to a mile,
Okay.
something like that, yeah.
And then how about south of 35?
Yep, so that's
South from Hanley.
south from Hanley. That's another possibility. It hasn't been talked about to this point with the township. It hasn't come up in any township meetings, I don't believe. But, you know, that's a possibility as well as far as taking that section of the road on too, because we do have commercial development off of that section from, you know, Hanley down to Tower. You know, we have Jack Burrow Drive there.
Quite a bit in there.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's open for discussion as well. I think that the township would probably entertain something like that. At least we can have the discussion.
Yeah, and that is the city property is on the west side of that all the way down to Tower?
Yep.
So,
Correct.
okay.
So from an access standpoint, it makes sense from the city and their development to take over the jurisdiction of that road to allow the development to have access on the old Highway 35, because without it, we would have to send, you know, looking at some multifamily and multi-residential in there, and to put that traffic in the Hudson Meadows development, it's, you know, as from the staffing recommendations, that would not be, we wouldn't want to do that to the people of that
Right.
neighborhood, you know, to put all that traffic through there.
Do you think agreement can be written that it's contingent? You know, that our taking over the highway will be contingent on the successful. So yeah, for the public, there is a possibility. You know, you could write up a agreement contingent upon zoning approvals, because the developer is looking at rezoning that corner parcel to allow for a more multi-family unit.
Multi-family. We have a rezoning application in hand to potentially rezone the property from RM1, which is a medium density residential product, to an RM2, which allows a much higher level of density. The initial thought was right around, I think, 150-ish units, one multifamily building phased into 2 projects. So, again, that type of density, you know, the demand is certainly there. We're talking about workforce housing, affordable housing, things like that, you know, certainly fits with that, but we also have to be cognizant of and protecting our residents that live in the neighborhood adjacent to it to the north, to make sure that we're not putting that much traffic directly onto that street too.
Well, just to the north of that, isn't that the park and ride?
Correct.
So is there room to go behind it? Is that what you would be doing? I don't think that's a good idea. I agree. We can't push.
Just west of the parking ride, there's 5 or 6 twin homes or duplexes, and then it transitions into the single family product that they have up there in the rest of Hudson Meadows. So
I think at what point would we be financially secure, I guess, is the zoning approval doesn't make us financially secure. It just says
I think it's final development plan approval.
Which would include?
That would be the last step that they would have to go through to get their project ultimately approved, if it makes it to that point.
Does that include a commitment to the costs?
I would envision a development agreement on this one to talk, and we have had talks with the applicant about the turn lane to serve the site. There's no curb and gutter on Old 35.
No, rural road.
That would have to be the developer's expense, as well as storm sewer, all that stuff. So there are improvements that they would have to make as that site were to develop. I mean, obviously we're too far out to be there because we haven't gone through the public process yet. But yeah, there's going to be there would most likely need to be a developer's agreement that I would work through with city attorney and the applicants.
Then do we have an idea what the maintenance costs are going to be over some period of time? I mean,
Yeah.
It sounds like it probably needs,
So that's the other consideration
now.
is, when I had a street maintenance, say a Farner rep in here looking at our road project that's doing our current, crack filling and flex patching project. The salesman and I did run out to that section of the city and look at that road, and he gave an estimate of, $50,000 to $75,000 to flex patch it, crack fill it, and then either do a slurry seal or a chip seal over it to bring it up to standards. Because what I don't want to do is, bring that road on and add it to our growing list of needs that's already in the city, knowing that we're bringing on a road that's needing repairs as well. So, are we able to push some of those costs out onto the developer? Because the reason why we're taking it on is because of the development. So those are all things that we'll have to be cognizant of moving forward.
I would think we wouldn't want to take the project on. It becomes, what's the value? What's the balance here?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be out $50,000, $75,000 pretty much up front.
Yeah.
It just impacts to my recommendation to the Plan Commission and ultimately the council on the rezoning. It'd be hard from a planning level to support an application that would put that much traffic onto Metal Arc. Is it? I can't think of it.
Yeah, the road that goes into the subdivision.
Yep.
Yeah, Metal Arc.
Yep. So that's kind of what started the whole discussion.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Nick Vivian, I do represent the developer on this one, and it's sort of an interesting project in that the property, which is about 6 acres, is in the city. You have Metal Arc to the north, which provides some access, and then you have Old 35 on the east, which is town jurisdiction, which provides some access as well. We don't necessarily need the city to take jurisdiction of Old 35 in order to do a project on this property. The city has zoning and regulatory authority. We could work with the town, and in fact, we started to have those conversations with the town, and their immediate thought was, well, let's talk with the city, and Mike's thoughts were, let's talk with the town as well. I think it's probably a better partnership if the city were to take jurisdiction of that road just because of the access and everything that's potentially going to happen as a result of the development if this one moves forward. And we certainly understand the need for through access to that site from both Metal Arc and 35. We understand the need for turn lanes. Obviously there's some traffic improvements that are there as well. So this is one where I think it probably makes sense to kind of look at this as a public-private partnership to say, how do we, even though any developer can do a project on the piece of land and deal with it as the jurisdiction sits with the roadway, how do we work together? How do we figure out something that makes sense, some structure, so that road comes in, it gets the improvements that it needs. The city has jurisdiction, there's more control, and that whole area kind of works together. And then it puts the city in control of its external roadways on that boundary on that side, which is probably at least a decent goal to have from a public works perspective. So we know we're a long ways away in terms of where things are at from the development moving forward. But as we look to acquire this property, access is one contingency of the purchase, and so we wanted to get some clarity from the city as to whether it would have an interest in taking the road in jurisdictionally, because that will then direct whether we're working with your staff or whether we're working with the town staff. So this was really step one. We do have our rezoning application, which is moving forward before the Plan Commission. And I think as Mike said, hopefully your direction will be helpful to staff as it looks then to make a recommendation on the rezoning application, because access is awfully important with the density that we're talking about with multifamily.
And the other interesting thing about the project is, from what Mr. Johnson has said in his conversations and what he's heard, there is definitely a need for multi-residential housing in Hudson. just because the market is very high right now. There's not a lot of homes that people could get into or apartments that people could get into that's affordable. So there's definitely a need there in the city of Hudson for this type of development. So that's what also kind of makes this an interesting project as well.
Yeah, I think I would be interested in kicking this to the council, because if I'm reading this right, is there potential on the north part of what's already developed? Is that what we're talking about? North of, I'm looking at this guy here, sorry.
Yep. So basically where the yellow highlighted area is,
Yep.
that's where the proposed development would be.
Oh, okay, on the south part of it.
Yep. Because whatever is kind of that shaded lighter color, that's city limits, and then everything in the dark kind of topography, that's town limits.
Is
Is your question?
Is Old
the area
35
to-
right on the, is this right on the border, Old 35? Or is this different than?
So Old Highway 35, on the west side, there is city limits. It is adjacent to city limits. On the east side, the entire stretch is town of Hudson.
Yes, that's, I mean, it's right on the border.
Yep.
So it seems like, just big picture looking at it, it would make more sense if the city did take care of that, because it feels like there's more development on the city of Hudson side than the town of Hudson side. Does that make sense? So it feels like it's more related to what's going on, and I think that's what you're trying to describe for us, right? It's that access point. So it seems, I would be interested in that, I think.
Yeah, I don't think there's any other land that's developable, is there, on that, from between Stage Line and Stagecoach and Hanley? It's just this, is this the last piece?
I believe so.
Everything
yeah.
else is,
Yep, everything else is developed.
that's developed as part of as part of its town of Hudson
Yeah.
on the north end, larger lots. And
I mean, I guess what I'm thinking about is if those are kind of our people, so to speak, it's the city of Hudson residents, it seems like that we would take responsibility for the road that gets them to their place, as long as it's a border anyway, so it seems like it makes sense, big picture.
Liz, do you have any advantages, disadvantages, how this would be beneficial to either of us?
Well, for those that don't know me in the audience and whatever, I'm Liz Moline, and I'm acting as chair for representing the town of Hudson as the chairman. And when we were approached with this, talked with both Mikes with the city here, and we're looking at the situation that, yes, it would be an access onto a town of Hudson jurisdictional road, and the town, of course, is not eager to allow additional, not just additional traffic, but multi-traffic. And so therefore, we looked into the summary of what the status was of it, and I believe you're looking at some of the information with the town parcels to the north there, and I believe there's 2 or 3, and then the rest are City of Hudson on the west side, and then the Park and Ride that is open for possibility of a change with that parcel also, and then the city parcel. And the balance on the east side is all town of Hudson. Mm-hmm. And so looking at that, and what has changed over the years is obviously traffic has increased to get onto the new Highway 35 off of Hanley. Getting up to 94 on the old Highway 35 is one of the exits for people to get to, and entrances to get down to the highway. So there's been a great deal of traffic added to that roadway. The town of Hudson has 100+ miles of road to do. So it would take us about 10 years to get, if we did 10 miles each year type thing. Old Highway 35 right now is not on our
Maintenance list.
next few years type thing. It's not a high priority when we look at all of our town roads. So there's that issue. We are concerned with, like I say, taking on, if you're, giving access to multi-traffic, we're adding that amount of traffic, and we have to maintain that.
Mm-hmm.
And we also are concerned as to future developments or whatever, if we do turn it over, we don't want to look at the town of Hudson residents having to pay for street standards too. So we're looking at those parcels to the north and then of course to the east. And when I mentioned about the park and ride, there's an issue there that it's possible it was turned over with when the state turned over jurisdiction to the town for that roadway, it may have been included in that. So there's a question of ownership on that too, and where that can go, and whether if it's state or if it's town, if we have any desire to make any changes there. And then of course there's the parcels on the north, and then there's a question of researching any issues if because you could not create islands too. So we would have to research that. So before we've spent any more time on it and going any further, this is the steps that we took. I took it to the town board in February. They were interested in pursuing it for discussion, reassuring them that it was not a one meeting item, so that we had an opportunity to discuss it further with the city.
So just so I'm clear, is it the town would like the city to take this strip of Old 35?
Being the majority of the traffic is city generated, that is why we're looking at it, yes.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I want to make sure I'm clear on that, so.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I would be good with talking about it. Are we looking just to see if we're going to recommend it or bring it to the city council? Is that what we're?
I think that's the
We're just
recommendation
looking
that's needed.
to make a recommendation for city staff to bring it to a future council meeting for discussion.
Yeah, I would make that recommendation. I don't know if you need a motion or what you need. If we need a
Motion.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, so I would move to bring to discussion on the city council level the possible acquisition of Old State Highway 35 south from Hanley Road to Stage Line.
I'll second that.
Can we please amend to say and possible action to council?
Pardon?
And possible action to council. So we'll go to the town first again and then bring it back to the council, but then we'll want discussion and possible action on the agenda.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
I'm just trying to.
Friendly amendment, sure. Yeah, I'm open to that, yeah.
All right. I'm acceptable with that. Do we need to say anything about paying attention to costs, or is that obvious?
I think that's obvious.
I think that just goes with the discussion.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor?
All right.
All right. Motion passes. Thank you.
Have a good night.
See you guys.
Now the easy one's out of the way. Item 2, letter of engagement and scope of work for discussion and possible action on the proposed 2019 sidewalk inventory.
Yeah, so at the last Public Works Committee meeting, I brought forward an idea of doing a citywide sidewalk assessment. And I told the committee that I was going to reach out to a couple of companies to obtain some quotes on what that would be, what that cost would be. And Bolton and Mink and SCH got back to me. They currently do a lot of our GIS and engineering work between the two firms. And it was considerably less than what I had anticipated. The first number from SCH came in at $13,310. And Bolton Mink's base quote was for $19,720. So there was further discussion with Chairman Weber about, as you can see in Bolton and Mink's proposal, they also have an optional task number 2, which would be pedestrian ramp inventory. And what this consists of is basically they Bolton and Mink staff would go out to each pedestrian ramp within the city of Hudson, and they would basically shoot the grade of it, make sure the slopes are correct, the widths are correct, if they have truncated domes, that type of thing, and if they meet current ADA standards. And so SCH did not have that in their plan. So I did reach out to them and ask them what a kind of a preliminary number would be to add that, and they came back at $12,000 to $15,000 more than the base $13,310 bid.
Wow.
So it is a substantial cost, you know, than to the original kind of base bid. And what the base bid would include would be a staff member from, you know, one of these firms would go out and they'd walk every single linear feet of our sidewalk. What we would do is we would come up with a matrix or a measuring stick to determine the grade of the sidewalks so that it's a consistent grade. Each broken sidewalk panel, raised sidewalk panel, so on and so forth would receive a grade. The higher the grade, the more severe it would be for replacement. So a level 5 sidewalk would be, we need to replace this year because it's a hazard to the, you know, pedestrians. 4 being, you know, the least, and go on from there. 1 would be, you know, just maybe a crack in the panel type of thing, but no immediate pedestrian danger. And so what we're looking to do is we're looking to look the entire city, gather all this data, and then we're able to put it on a map, GIS map, and we can coordinate, you know, we can put red dots for the severe ones, yellow dots for the ones that are still passable. And what we can do from a staffing level and a public works committee level is associate costs to some of these replacements. We can go out there and we can add up all of the red dots and say there's 10,000 linear feet of red dots at a cost of about, you know, $8 a linear foot to replace, so that's $80,000. You know, so it just gives us as a staff a lot more comfort, it gives us a better way to budget into the future for sidewalk replacement and sidewalk improvements. So it's a good base start for a community this size. A lot of communities our size and bigger have this already. It's using, you know, new technologies that are currently used in the public works field. It's bringing us up to date as far as, you know, the inventory, using the GIS systems. Now that we have that on board, it's something that we can take on internally. It's just getting this base work done. And then once we get that, you know, we can manage it from a staffing level from here on out. So it's kind of just this initial data collection because we really don't have anybody on staff to designate for the next 3 to 4 months to walk 38 miles of sidewalks and snap pictures and take measurements and data points. So
when would the project be completed?
We would look to get it completed by, you know, this fall.
Great. So I'm thinking of the Highway 35 and discussions we've had about sidewalks along that reconstruction.
Yep.
And it would, so then we would have some good data. We don't have to go out and gather that data.
Right.
Immediately could decide how that should be integrated into that project.
Right. Absolutely.
Like it.
So
but it sounds like the Bolton Minks is the better bid now.
Well,
am I
if
hearing that correctly?
No, so Bolton and Mink, you know, their base bid is $19,720.
Right. Oh,
If they do the additional pedestrian ramp assessment, their bid goes up to, you know, to include the base bid and the optional pedestrian ramp, it would go up to $35,680. In comparison, SCH base bid is $13,310. Let's just say you go on the high side and add $15,000 to that to do the pedestrian ramp improvements or inventory. It'd be around $28,300. So a difference of, you know, about $7,000 between the two firms.
And you're recommending the SCH one?
Yep, I recommend that we proceed with SCH.
with both phases.
That's up for discussion tonight. I mean, is that?
My perspective is that we know that most of our ramps are not compliant.
Mm-hmm.
Many of our ramps are not compliant because of to the new standards. To the old standards, at one point they were compliant.
Yeah.
They're now no longer width-wise or they're off. The rest of it, I have no idea about slope or anything.
Right. Because there's certain grade, I believe it's I should know this, 4% grade, 4% slope is the minimum standard for pedestrian ramps. So, you know, the thought is scope of services. We already have a firm out there walking our sidewalks and doing the data collection on the sidewalks themselves. Why not utilize them out in the field with their GIS data to do the pedestrian ramps as well? You know, they're already out there doing it. It's an additional cost, but at the very least, I want to proceed with the sidewalk assessment and then leave it up to Public Works Committee to add on the optional pedestrian ramp inventory. Does that make sense, Paul?
Yeah.
Okay.
What
The
you
other option
thinking,
is we
Paul?
could, you know, we could always bring them back next year to do the pedestrian ramps if we don't want to spend
Yeah.
$30,000 this year on the inventories.
But will it be additional?
Well, yeah, there's
Because they're not doing
yeah,
two of them, it's gonna cost another $5,000 to,
right, to bring them back into town. That's the thing. I didn't get that answer.
yeah, I'd be surprised.
I would presume
if
there
it
would be
didn't.
additional cost.
Yeah,
So the overall annual budget is 75,000 for the sidewalk repair, right?
80,000.
Oh, 80,000?
Yep.
Okay.
Is it 75, Deb?
And just what's the total, so.
You might be right. That is in the issue sheet, Paul. You are correct. 75,000.
So what I'm just trying to figure out is, for the SEH,
Mm-hmm.
what is the total with, I know it's 13.3 for the sidewalks, but
Yep.
what would it be for that plus the ramps? Do we know that?
So when I contacted them last week Friday, because I didn't think it was an option at that point. They basically gave me a range of 12,000 to 15,000 extra to perform that work. But I would certainly get a quoted LOE from them stating the actual costs. And so if we don't, you know, if
Yeah.
the committee is wanting to collect that information for our ped ramps, what I would suggest is making a motion to accept SEH's base bid of $13,310 for the sidewalk assessment, along with adding the pedestrian ramp assessment not to
not
exceed.
to exceed 15,000.
Right.
I think I'm good with that. So I would move to accept SEH's base bid of 13,310. Can we just do that one right now and then come back to a second one?
Yep.
In other words, let's do the sidewalks now and then let's say, this is off the motion now, sorry. And then I think we should get a firm quote from them and then look at what that number is before we pass it. I don't know if that's nitpicking, but just because I want to know what it would be,
Okay.
if that makes sense. Or do you just,
Oh, if we set a limit,
so if they're saying 12 to 15, what if we just said like a max of like 14 or something like
what
that?
was Bolton Mink's approximate number?
They had 35, so they have,
15,960 there's those.
Yeah, so 15 is going to be it's not an
it's got to come
It's
out
not
of
an
15.
unreasonable number.
Okay.
And I don't know if personally, I'd like to get these things moving and get this stuff done.
Okay.
Because it's a good tool. It's a great tool.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll amend the motion to accepting the SEH bid for 13,310 with the option, right, to also do the ramps for up to $15,000.
And I will second the amendment. We have a motion to accept SEH's base bid of $13,210 for the assessment and for to obtain a additional bid for the pedestrian ramps. So analysis of the pedestrian ramps not to exceed $15,000. And
Can you specify a funding source then too?
pardon?
Specify the funding source to be taken out of the sidewalk.
Oh, to be taken out, thank you,
Yeah.
taken out of the current sidewalk funds. You agree with that?
Second?
Okay.
Right? Did you get that, Deb?
Yeah, I got it.
Pass the motion.
I got it.
Robert's spinning in his grave.
Right.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Mike.
Yep.
This will be a good base, another good baseline for us
Absolutely.
to have. Next item, retaining wall policy.
So, this is a draft retaining wall policy that staff did in-house, basically to set up some guidelines as it pertains to retaining walls within the city of Hudson. Because right now, we currently don't have any documentation on how the city should proceed with problems that arise from retaining walls. There's nothing in writing for citizens to look at, to review, to follow. And this is, a much needed document within the city because of our topography. If you walk around the city, you run into retaining walls all over the place. Some of them in good condition, some of them in fair condition, some of them in poor condition. And so what we're trying to do with this document is basically outline policies and procedures from the city, what we are going to do with new construction and existing construction. Okay, just to have a document in place that staff can follow. And this, like I said, this is in its draft state. Anything on here is not set in stone. It can be changed. I just wanted to get the conversation going. Ultimately, this will go in front of our attorney again. I've had her look at the rough draft. She made a couple of comments, but after tonight's conversation, I'll bring it back to her. Probably bring it back to Public Works Committee the following month. And then at that point in time, we can maybe pass it along to City Council for final approval. This is a document that's, in my opinion, is very important to the city, and we want to get it right. We don't want to put the city in a bad position moving forward, taking on undue liabilities against the city. So we want to be very careful in the wording that we choose, and how we put the document together. So, if you want to make changes right now, we can. We can certainly. I know, Paul, you just got the agenda tonight. Nothing that we have to move on tonight. We can always postpone for next month's meeting to make any more final changes, but at least we're moving in the right direction. Because I know I've obtained multiple phone calls on retaining walls, and is this ours, is this the city's, so on and so forth, and we just need to have a document in place saying what we're going to do.
Yeah, I think I absolutely agree. I know this was Tom Zuby and I had some discussions, more than one, about retaining walls that we need to be working on right now.
Yeah.
And we don't have the proper guidance, written guidance or policy. We don't want to set policy by what we do, but we need to move on this one. I had and I had a couple thoughts on it, and I guess that's what it'll just be. One of the concerns, one of the issues I see is the walls need to be a minimum distance from the property line. Right now they're set on the property line, even on the city line, and the minute you do that, you lose 1.5 feet of sidewalk. That space is gone. You can't walk or ride a bike as if it were free. You can use up to the edge of the sidewalk. So when you have a wall, boom, you lose that space. So that may be specified elsewhere.
No, that's when we say, let's see, for new walls that are
in other documents, not necessarily this one.
Oh, no, I don't believe there is a certain setback for retaining walls.
Setback. So somewhere in there we need to
specify that.
Setback. And our building inspector may have something that he uses.
Yeah.
The other thought second thought I had was under item C on the first page, walls that are more than 5 feet high. I think that's somehow, I hope that doesn't let them loose, because 5 feet's a pretty high wall.
Right.
To me, you know, like 18 inches, 2 feet, still has to be set back, but I'm not sure what else applies then. But,
Right.
5 foot wall starts to impede or create, it certainly creates a structure, it's a problem.
Right. Because right now our current ordinance says that a retaining wall over 5 feet, you have to obtain a permit for construction. And that way our building inspector office is aware that a retaining wall is being built at this address, such an address. They're able to go out there, inspect it, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Anything under 5 feet.
Is there any reason
very
why smaller walls, 5 feet or less? That's a lot of wall.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know if
The rationale.
yeah, if they got that from another community or something, or failure rates of walls underneath 5 feet are less than over 5 feet. I don't know where they got that number from.
I would appreciate some, I don't know how we can get, if we can get more data or information about that,
Okay.
what that height should be, but that seems excessive to me.
Mm-hmm.
But all it says is that you don't, could maybe still, you have to have all these specs and for the wall. Still doesn't, they should still have to have a permit within some, you know, a wall that high, and I don't know what the number is, but I'm concerned about that
Yeah.
piece.
Yeah.
And this gets us into another discussion that we're going to have later on, is what are the standards when we're going to look at somebody's private wall and say, or even ours first, but this has to be replaced. We're going to look at somebody's private wall and say, that has to be replaced. It's not acceptable either from an aesthetic or safety standpoint. I don't know I mean, that opens up a whole nother can of worms, but it's as we're going down this road.
Yeah. No, I think it's something that needs to be added to the document. It's not really specified in it now. I'll have to talk to David Gray, our lead building inspector, and see what are industry standards for retaining walls. At what point do you deem them to be unsafe? You know, that type of thing. Because I'm sure there's a lot of retaining walls that to the naked eye look like they're in poor shape, but they're probably, you know, the way that they're tied back into the, you know, the abutting hillside, or maybe they're a poured wall behind them. You know, there's different, there's all types of different retaining walls out there. So we need to have what the industry standards say for a correctly built retaining wall, one that's in good shape versus one that's about to fail and be, you know, a nuisance. It's basically public health nuisance. You know, will it injure? Will it wreck property, adjoining property, that type of thing? So I think it's something that we do need to specify. And then what authorities do we have in our current code that allows us to basically condemn a retaining wall?
Yeah.
You know, do we have that authority to do that in our current ordinance, or does it need to be amended?
So David would be a
Yeah, I can reach
good
out to.
resource for that.
Yep.
All right, was reading under the City of Hudson responsibilities, the third item. If a retaining wall is under the city's jurisdiction and is needed replacement, the City of Hudson is only responsible to ensure that adjacent infrastructure is safe to use per an engineer review.
Mm-hmm.
Yada, yada. The city would build a wall to minimum standards to hold back material. Any improvements requested by the property owner above and beyond the minimum height requirements shall be paid by the said resident. Like, with that, my thought, well, the cheapest thing may be a poured concrete wall.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of walls around here that are not, you know, they're hand-built walls, and they look very nice, but
Yep.
so is that meant to say, yeah, we would be responsible for, we'd put in just a wall that would make things safe,
Yep.
but it isn't necessarily going to be as aesthetically as pleasing as a homeowner might want.
Correct.
And then they would be responsible for that? Is
Yep.
that, how am I interpreting that?
Yep. And a lot of times, you don't need a lot of courses. Each row is called a course on retaining walls. So let's just say, for a sidewalk, a retaining wall along a sidewalk or an alley, so to speak, the city, per engineer's recommendations, would determine what that height would be for that wall to keep the hillside from coming onto the alley or the sidewalk. But the abutting property owner might want it higher to have a nice level yard, But the city isn't interested in the abutting property owner having a nice level yard. The city is interested in making sure that the alleyway or the sidewalk is safe to use. So that's kind of where I'm coming from with that bullet point. I don't want to open up that can of worms and put that liability onto the city. For, our first interest is making sure that, it's in good condition, that the abutting infrastructure is safe to use. That's what we're interested in.
So we could end up some private-public partnerships.
In those instances, it would
cost
definitely
of
be
sharing the cost of
Yep.
the wall.
Yep.
We build the base wall and pay for the basic, and they pay for the additional.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good to have in there. Now, I know we're going to get into as soon as policy is written, the next thing is the inventory of the walls, which are on which ones are on city property, and do we own them or not? Who built the wall?
Yep.
And then hopefully in this policy here, that gets clear as to who's responsible for it. Are we going to assume responsibility for walls that have been built,
Right.
although we didn't build them?
It's going to be a lot of digging in the files in the archives, looking for easements, agreements, so on and so forth, between the city and property owners.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a great intern job for next summer, or maybe even this. I don't know. It's kind of late in the game for this summer, but we're definitely going to need to get an assessment done or an inventory done of all the walls in the city and determine who has authority over those current structures.
How many active issues do you think we have, based on the contacts you're getting? Is it 10 or is it 50? Or?
No, it's less than 10. It's less than 10.
It's just that we've assumed the costs for all the surveys.
The couple that I'm aware of are costly.
Yeah.
So getting that resolved as to who owns that wall and who's responsible for replacement
Yep.
is critical.
Well, especially, we have the Highway 35 project coming into town, in the next couple of years, 2021. And if you go down towards the railroad trestle, of course, you got retaining walls on the east and west side of the road there. And, those don't come cheap if we were to have to replace those walls. And so, we need to, the purpose of kind of getting this going is if and when the city does own a wall, which we do probably own some walls within the city, which ones yet to be determined, but at least we can start maintaining those and keeping them for as long as they can, because to replace a retaining wall is very, very, very expensive. So we want to be able to perform maintenance to the ones that we own is in the city's best interest.
I know our attorney has at least done an initial.
Yeah, she's done an initial
review.
Yeah.
Is she going to be doing more work looking in depth at that ownership piece?
Yep.
Is that?
Yeah, she kind of did a rough kind of overview. We changed some of the wording on that I had in the original document. I told her that I was going to bring it to Public Works Committee for, your thoughts and opinions. I was going to add those to the document, basically hand it back over to her and say, this is what we came up with from Public Works Committee. Take some time to look at it and make sure everything is kosher, and then we'll bring it back to Public Works for kind of final approval before we go to council.
I think it's a lot of progress from
Yeah.
not having a policy to, I mean, this is a huge step forward, so.
Yeah, and it's, you know, we've reached out to various communities that you would think would have retaining wall policies, like Stillwater or something. It's very few and far between where you find anything for retaining walls. So it's been, you know, it's basically just kind of finding communities in the United States that have one and kind of taking bits and pieces from each one and what applies to here and putting this together as a starting point. You know?
That's great. So we're ahead of the curve.
It's yeah, it's
That's a
you
good
would
place
think that
to be.
there'd be a lot of them, but there's really not. You know, something you really don't think about because they, you know, you only think about it when they're falling over.
Right.
You know, so
Good work, Mike.
I think the last comment that I have is it's a paragraph following the City of Hudson responsibilities. The Public Work Department removes and repairs damages. The last sentence says, in the event of a retaining wall that sits directly on the property line, each entity will pay 50% of the total project costs. I guess that assumes that there are no previous agreements about who owns the wall, or
yeah,
it's kind of like there's a whole bunch of scenarios
yeah,
where the property is, who built it, who paid for it, why it was built.
right. I'll add that language.
That I know I don't know all those. I have enough to know that I'm totally ignorant about all the issues involved here. So this is a really good start, but we're really going to have to, that piece about shared costs is going to, that's going to be, that, you know, this is going to be the thing, because it could get really expensive. It will be really expensive just to, our expenses we're going to have to face here.
Yeah.
Like Cooley Road was,
All right.
you know, that was just a little example of.
Right. Absolutely. And if, I mean, both Paul and Jim, if you have any, you know, if you look this over tonight or, you know, within the next couple weeks and you see something or that you want to have changed or added, feel free to email me and tell me to throw it in there. And I mean, like I said, nothing is off limits at this point. It's very rough right now, and just getting all of our thoughts out onto the paper.
I think this is just really super big advance.
Yeah.
Keep on
Yep.
going on this one. This is
Yep.
great.
Okay.
Item 4 we've taken care of. Item 5, discussion and possible action on the stormwater pond maintenance easement for Vine Hills Pond.
So this pond is off of Vine Street, at the intersection of Diamond Drive and Vine, across from the YMCA,
Okay.
on the south side of the YMCA intersection. There's a lot of history with this facility, dating back to 2002, maybe. And there's been a lot of dispute over ownership, maintenance, responsibilities, so on and so forth, in the past. And as recently as 2014, I think it came to Public Works Committee or something like that. Every time the city has had no interest in maintaining the privately owned ponds. On one of your sheets in the document, or in the issue sheet, there should be a map that's kind of color coded. Okay, so if you look at this map, basically the city owns the orange portion of the pond. Okay, that's under city ownership.
And this is Vine Street at the
Yep,
top?
it's Vine Street. County Road UU is Vine Street.
Yep.
The ponds in the yellow are private lots.
Okay.
And so those portions of the pond are owned by the adjacent property owner, and it under, you know, current stormwater ordinance, they are responsible for maintaining those ponds. What I am requesting from you tonight is basically a recommendation to reach out to these adjoining property owners to start the conversation of drafting a maintenance easement on these two privately owned ponds because if you think about it, the city already owns the center portion of the pond. And, you know, on paper, it looks like 3 separate ponds, but in fact, it's one facility. They're all interconnected.
Okay.
So the pond on the west side of Diamond, the one on the far left, there's pipes that run underneath Diamond that overflow into Pond 2, which the city owns. And that just basically, the city-owned pond and then the pond to the right are basically just one big facility. It's one big pond.
Okay.
And so this is a unique situation where the city has interest in maintaining it and and making sure that the infrastructure is working correctly. And I know the homeowners have an interest in making that facility look appealing or aesthetically appealing to the eye. So that's kind of what I'm at tonight and why I'm bringing it forward at this point in time. Basically have a recommendation from Public Works Committee to, start the process of drafting a maintenance easement over these facilities for the city to maintain.
So can you define maintenance easement? It's just that we would take them over basically, kind of? Or?
They would still own the property,
Okay.
but the city would be responsible for removing the trees and mowing, 2 times a year the embankments and removing any invasive species, dredging if it ever does come to that point, upgrading some of the structures. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. And it all kind of falls back to private versus public ponds. It speaks to a bigger issue within the city. And because of our new standards through the MS4 permit, we're going to need to take a bigger look, or a harder look at, private facilities and public facilities, and the city taking over certain private facilities where it makes sense, where our rainwater is being captured off the road and going to that versus a stormwater pond that's capturing parking lot rainwater that's dedicated to that business or area. But this is like I said, this is a unique situation where we don't run into very often, where the city does own a portion of the land sandwiched in between 2 other privately owned facilities.
Mm-hmm. I would move that. That makes sense to me. So you're just saying to approach the owners with a maintenance easement where we would basically manage the ponds for them.
Right.
Okay. I think that makes sense because they're all connected as a waterway, it
Right.
sounds like. So.
And we're already out there maintaining our portion,
Yeah.
I'll second that motion. I would suggest that we contact the associations that are involved too. There actually might be 2 associations here.
Okay.
I don't know, because there's at least a couple different builders that I'm aware of.
Okay.
But bring them into the loop, just as because I know it's been an issue, like you say, since 2002.
Yeah.
But this is and I kind of look at this as a trial to see if this approach is workable for some of our other ponds. And that's all this is an experiment. I look at it as an experiment to see, is this an effective way to do this? Is it functional for the city? What does it cost us to do these kinds of things?
Yeah.
As we have.
One thing that I would like to note is, back in 2016, I believe Liz Moline, who was here earlier tonight, did put together kind of a summary of issues related to these facilities on Vine Street, or off of Vine Street. And in that, she put in her summary the following. It says, if the city does want to take on responsibility, the following has to be done. Number 1, property owners have to be contacted to review the status, determine whether they're interested in providing an easement, which we're doing tonight. 2, the areas would have to be inspected to determine that the areas are at the elevations initially approved, and drainage pipes, grates, if any other, are clear of debris, which they are. The 3rd one is property owners would be responsible for cleaning up their portions at their expense prior to the city taking over responsibility. So that's something that, she had put in the summary, and I don't know if it's not really an ordinance or a policy, so we we may be able to take on some of those, because there are some trees that have to be removed out of that facility. And I would consider taking on those costs to
Right.
get the initial cleanup done. The fourth thing, property owner would be responsible for providing the required documents for the easements, subject to review by the city attorney at their expense. So there would be a cost to the property owner to turn over. And I think what they were looking at here originally was, I think the city was guarding themselves against the requests from property owners to take over their private facilities. You know, a private property owner, they didn't want a private property owner to come in and say, you know, I want you to take over my easement, our maintenance easement, and you have to draft it and you have to pay for it, and so on and so forth. They want to have the property owner have some skin in the game, because we're actually, in theory, we're maintaining their land. You know, in theory, you know, we are maintaining their land. So, and then it just says city would be responsible for future upkeep, maintenance of the areas if the easement is approved. So,
I think that the property owners having to bring it up to standards before we take it over is, I think, is going to be a real balking point.
it's going to be hard.
On the other hand, with MS4 requirements, we have to force this issue, do we not?
Right.
They have to bring them up, they have to be brought up to standards.
Right.
Our ponds have to.
Yep.
Well, it might also be something where the city could do the work for the property owner, and the property owner could reimburse the city or something, or, you know, you could work out something that way too.
Yeah.
Might be a
Yep.
quicker, easier way to do it, so.
There would be a possibility of cost sharing at that point too.
Yeah. Because we have an interest in
Either
Right.
way. How do we,
It's tough because you don't want to set a precedence where the city is cost sharing, you know, upkeep of a pond. Because then you kind of open up a can of worms as far as other people with private ponds requesting the city do cost sharing. So, for example, you know, say there's a private facility within the city, which there is. You know, we as a city have the authority to go in and inspect that pond and basically give them a citation if the pond isn't up to standards. Okay? So the city does have that authority now based upon the ordinance that you
who
have.
does that inspection? Is
So
that-
we have a staff member. Chad Christensen is our stormwater.
That's right,
Yep.
that's right.
So he does all of our post-pond management inspections. So he actually has the authority to go and, you know, inspect private ponds, issue citations, have them clean up their ponds. You know, we don't, that's a whole nother issue because, you know, the city has ponds that aren't up to standards yet. So we got to get our ponds up to standards before we can go ahead and start, you know, issuing citations to homeowners. I don't feel comfortable doing that, knowing that our facilities aren't meeting current standards. So, I mean, it's a really big picture. There's a lot of things to consider moving forward. That's why, you know, this one, like I said, the only reason I'm bringing this one here tonight is because it is a unique situation with the city basically owning a pond to adjoining facilities that is all one big pond.
So do you think we can move on one without opening Pandora's box?
Yeah, I believe so. I'm not aware of any other facility in the city where this is.
Where you have the blend of half and half?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if there are others in the city like this, where, you know, the city owns half and the private owns the other half, I'd take that on in a heartbeat.
Right. So do we have a motion?
Yep, just need to complete it to move forward.
The motion is to go ahead and
Contact.
start drafting a maintenance agreement and contacting the owners and
See if they
seeing
get interested. Okay.
what the appetite is. As we move forward on our own ponds, we'll be collecting some costs information, so we'll kind of start to get an idea of where that's coming from. Now, we do have we did increase our stormwater utility rates, did we not, recently?
Yes.
So that's going to start funding this, that was to start funding this.
Yep.
And for those who you were listening, we were significantly below anybody around us, so
Yeah.
we just came up to about the average of what's being charged anywhere around us.
Do we need to vote?
Moved and,
Is that gonna?
it's moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The next item, the last item is project update for Public Works. Next to last item.
The only project update that I have for you tonight is Farner, the 2018 street maintenance project that was pushed back to this year. They did start last week.
The day before the storm.
We were concerned that the material that they would be putting down would come back up from the plows. So we're very cognizant. We've been out inspecting the roads that they did do. And good news is the crack filling that they did perform last week before the snow has stayed in place. So it looks like they won't have to come back in and do any, touch-ups. They do have 3 or 4 other roads that they're going to be back in the town for starting tomorrow to finish up the 2018 project. And then we're also in the process of receiving bids for a 2019 project as well. So I just want to let you know that, if you see road crews out in town, it's the carryover work from 2018 that's occurring right now.
Okay.
And then the last thing that I have for you is Arbor Day is coming up. And I just want to make a mention to anybody listening out in the audience that we'll be having a Arbor Day event at Lakefront Park on Saturday, April 27th from 9 o'clock until noon. I have some refreshments, program, proclamation read, and then some trees to plant in the park and other surrounding areas in town. So if you're bored and looking to do a volunteer project and be involved in the community, we're having an Arbor Day event on that day.
Sorry, again, what were the dates, date and time again?
April 27th, starting at 9 till noon.
And Mike, do folks sign up in advance, or can they just show up?
They can just show up.
Okay.
Yep.
And all ages, families?
All ages,
whatever?
yep, absolutely. It's a good way for local organizations, youth organizations to be involved in the community, something that's easy and fun to do.
Yeah. There's going to be an Arbor Day event in Lakefront Park at basically the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of, there's
it's following the Earth Day.
Oh, the Earth Day event,
Day.
yeah, yep.
Yes.
It's kind of coordinating with one another,
Yeah.
so it's kind of be back to back, so,
Yep.
yep, absolutely. That's all I got for you tonight.
Okay. How about, do you want to say anything about I had the Highway 35
Open house?
public and open house,
Yep.
public involvement meeting last week?
Yep, so we had our second public engagement meeting for the Highway 35 project that's coming into town in 2021. And there will be another one coming up again in the future months. I believe it's about 2 months out. And public input is always warranted. If any public was unable to come to that meeting, give myself a call or the city of North Hudson for those residents that are up there and have any questions that we can direct you in the right, direct you to the right person to answer those. So great meeting talking about, the overall project, the design concepts. There's some, pedestrian accommodations, bump outs, medians that are looking to be integrated into the project, the timeline, what's being done through our downtown, what's being done in front of the sewer plant, and then moving north into North Hudson, what's being done on their side as well. So we have a meeting, staff has a meeting with the engineers and state representatives that were at this meeting. We have a meeting with them tomorrow afternoon in Eau Claire to discuss some of the concerns that were brought up at the public engagement meeting from citizens. And so we want you to know that we are listening to you and trying to accommodate some of those concerns, a lot of it to do with access into North Hudson via the Highway 35 bridge, Lake Malibu Bridge. I know they originally proposed closing that down for the entirety of the project. And so we are looking into how we can keep that open for as many days possible throughout the process. So trying to incorporate, the needs of the contractor and construction crews with the needs of the residents. So good meeting. And like I said, we'll have more information as that third public engagement meeting comes out in the future.
Okay, great, thank you. Items for, Paul, do you have any questions about what's going on?
About the
About
third,
any of the public works projects? Been a tremendous amount of street patching going on. It's looking better. So,
Yeah. Yeah, we've had 2 crews out for the past 3 to 4 weeks, one on a spray patching machine, another one putting down hot mix asphalt in certain areas. So we're very aware of the potholes in the city, and if the public encounters any big doozies, call into the office and let us know, and we can put it down on our list, and our ever expanding list, and take care of it.
who has the responsibility for for Carmichael from Vine? There's about maybe 200 yards. That's where it's been patched together and built. It wasn't built as a continuous piece.
Mm-hmm.
There's some pretty good holes that are opening up on that
Is it
street.
Carmichael from Cooley, kind of the Target intersection going north? Is that the
No, it's
At Vine.
Carmichael from Vine South.
Vine South
Yeah,
That's town.
town?
yeah.
Yep.
We'll let them know.
Concerned about.
Yeah.
Well, is that going to be negotiated as part of the? Huh. Some more work to do there. Okay, items for future agenda. Anything, Paul?
I think I'm good. I mean, one thought I have is about public transportation potential. I don't know where that starts, though. I don't know if that starts in this committee or if that starts with even just conversation or trying to assess if there's a need in town and what are those needs. So I don't exactly know what committee that goes with because we don't have it right now. So
That's community development.
Community development, probably.
okay.
But I know there is a wider initiative in the county. I believe there's a county group or committee looking at public transportation. But I would assume that any questions or how we start that conversation would be in community development.
Okay.
Yeah, I've had some conversations with Mike Johnson, and there is some activity and learning and going on at this point. But
Okay.
yeah, I think that's probably something we need to the council needs to hear in the next couple of months about
Yep.
what are we doing, what's going on.
Today, Deb and I had a meeting with Advanced Disposal, who is our refuse collector in the city of Hudson. We're looking to do a pilot program in the downtown area, kind of on 2nd Street and blocks off, a recycling refuse pilot program where we have, recycling next to a garbage container. We're in cooperation with the Chamber of Commerce. There's definitely a need down there that's been expressed by visitors and business people. And so the city is looking at, by July 4th celebration, having those containers in place for use by the public.
Do we have a city compost anywhere? Do we have something in the?
We do not have any city compost or brush site that's designated in the city.
Would that be something to think about or talk about in the future? Or?
It's worth a look at. I know it's come up in conversations a few times in passing with myself and various staff members in public, and I've looked for a potential location in the city, and there really isn't a good one for the city of Hudson in the city limits that doesn't affect nearby neighborhoods or businesses
Okay.
or in a park. But I mean, we can certainly, I think there would be a need there, but ultimately where would you put one, and who would manage it and so on and so forth. So we would have to, we can start a conversation about it if you would like to, Paul.
Well, let me think more about it, and I haven't thought about the location thing at all, so it's just,
Because right now we have the curbside pickup for yard waste,
Yep.
which is taken to a composting facility where it gets reused, chipped, mulched, composted,
okay.
and then, resold as mulch or bagged for compost.
Okay.
All right. And our next meeting, do we have a scheduled for that?
I know we talked about it.
Well, this meeting kind of got pushed back because of spring election.
Mm-hmm.
I know we kind of pushed everything
We
back.
talked about May too, for some crazy reason. Did we talk May?
Well, council's on the 6th and the 20th, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So it'd have to be the 13th.
13th, yep, or the,
27th is Memorial
if you want to
Weekend.
stay on Mondays, we're on Tuesday, well, yeah, Mondays, 20th.
That works for me.
13th?
I think that
15th?
works for me.
I think that's what we said,
Okay.
but I'm just looking to see if it,
Yeah, I have a later meeting, but I only missed part of it, so we're almost done by 6:30, so that would probably work. So yeah, the
so 5
13th,
o'clock and.
5 o'clock start time, is that still working for you, Paul?
Yeah, I can do that.
So we need to reach out to Sarah and
Mhm.
make sure it gets on her calendar.
Okay.
Otherwise, the 14th looks like an alternate date for me, but I can't go any later in the month.
Yeah.
So,
Move to adjourn.
For the 14th.
second. All in favor? Aye.
All right.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Nice job, Mike.